Hi everybody, it's Professor Levi Allen and I'm so excited to talk to you today about the High Renaissance. Disclaimer, this video is a little bit longer than some of my other ones, so know that you can pause at any point, stop, take notes, come back to it. There's also a transition place where it's meant for you to stop, so don't be afraid to pause the video at any time. So as I said, we're talking about the High Renaissance today. So when you think of the High Renaissance, you probably think of those big three, right? You're thinking of Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael. And if you can name that other artist who would be part of this, he's also a Ninja Turtle. You can get a bonus point on your next test if you email it to me either through Canvas or through the school email before the end of the week that this module is due. But back to the High Renaissance artists. You have those big names, but just like any other period, a bunch of other artists exist and are making amazing work. And I want to talk about two who really focus on these quiet, deeply human ways that we need to connect in this period of Renaissance and humanism as we're looking at this change in art. So we're going to talk about Andrea del Sarto and Sofonisba Anguissola. So let's get started with talking about that. So I've moved out of my Renaissance studio to allow you to look at the work more closely that we approach. First person we're going to talk about is Andrea del Sarto. Del Sarto means son of a tailor. And he really was the son of a tailor. He was born in Florence, and he was known to be rather short, which I think is a fun fact. I like to know things like that about artists, so I'll share them. I'm also short, so it's a nice connection for me. When he started out, he was apprenticed to a goldsmith, and he worked a lot in frescoes, which is what you see for this self-portrait. He was considered to be the painter without errors. Vasari called him this, and Vasari is that art historian, the very first one. You'll read about him again in your modules. He created the lives of the artists, and he's going to tell us all of these intriguing facts about them, and he really liked Andrea and his work. There's a lot of exploring of color and soft, gentle natures and really striking compositions that we're going to see. So Andrea married this woman named Lucrezia, who Vasari does not like at all. So Lucrezia came to Andrea and gave him a dowry and a really nice house, which sounds odd to talk about, but it allowed him to be able to paint when he wanted. He would paint for carpenters and kings. He didn't always ask for money when he painted. Sometimes he would just do it. So it really allowed him this chance to explore and play and kind of create things for him as an artist. But why did Vasari not like Lucrezia? Well, because he called her faithless and jealous and vixenish. He thought that she was having affairs with Andrea's apprentices in his own studio. This is not proven. He also was very upset with her for when the bubonic plague came into Florence. Andrea stayed behind because he caught it and Lucrezia left. And then he died. So she lived another 40 years without him. So there's a lot of intriguing backstory to her. There's a poem about her if you want to find out more, but it is fascinating. However, Andrea saw Lucrezia as his muse. You are going to see her face in all of his Madonnas. So he really thinks of her as kind of the epitome of this female beauty. So let's look at our first work by him. The work we're going to explore by Andrea del Sarto is Madonna of the Harpies. So there's a couple things I want you to look at when you're looking at this piece. The Madonna is on a pedestal. So if you look, you notice there's something underneath her and she's standing up. There's two putti beside her. That's a really common thing you're going to see in a lot of Renaissance work. And then there's two saints that flank her. So it's forming this nice triangle, but that is a very gentle way to approach it. You're not going to see the harsh lines you see in Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci because they like those really sharp geometrics. This is kind of a softer composition or placement. The fabric leads you a little bit more. There's a little bit more roundness to everybody. They're slightly more elongated. So the two figures that you have beside her are Saint Bonaventure, could be Saint Francis, and then you have John the Evangelist. And then at the bottom is the cool part, that why is this called Madonna of the Harpies? So if you notice these strange little figures around the bottom of the pedestal, those are the harpies. The Sari said they might be locusts or loci, which are evil spirits. So it's this idea of the Christianity is stamping out with the birth of Christ and the purity of the Madonna to get rid of these evil things. And this is what they're going to put in their churches. And remember, that face that you see on her again, that is the face of Lucutia. So she is this ideal woman for them. So this is kind of this classical purity that you see left over from the ancient Greeks and Romans, mixed with these new experiments of color and design and concepts of purity. So that's our discussion of Andrea del Sarto. So this is your invitation to pause the video. Take a moment to think about the things you just learned about Andrea del Sarto. Think about the Madonna of the Harpies. Think about anything you might be curious about. Write them down. What did you learn? What was intriguing? There's a post on the discussion board you can post to for extra credit, or you can email me if you have questions. I'm happy to give you further resources. This is a great chance to pause and reflect. Now we're going to shift to our next artist. If you notice behind me, it's the frontispiece for the Lives of Artists, which is the work written by Vasari that talks about these people that we're intrigued by. So Vasari, as I said, called Andrea del Sarto the master of painter. He has the painter with no errors. So the next artist I want to talk about is also somebody that Vasari was very intrigued by. This is Sofonisba Anguissola. She was a court painter for the courts of Spain and Italy and brings a wealth of technique and knowledge to her work. So Sofonisba was born in Italy, but ended up being a court painter and a lady-in-waiting for Philip II of Spain, which is a huge deal. So she's a noblewoman. Her parents were pretty liberal with her education. She learned to read, she learned to write, she learned Latin and Greek, she learned all the sciences and music, and she also learned painting. There were 6 daughters in her family and 1 son, and each of these girls learned techniques and were very well educated. She was very renowned at a time that a lot of artists, much less female artists, were not noticed. She got to meet Michelangelo. He influenced some of her work. So you're going to see some really strong attention to anatomy in her work. It's going to be less well-rounded than what we saw in the forms of Del Sarto. You're going to start to see a little bit more of a musculature and kind of firmness to her figures. They're very anatomically correct. So Vasari said of her that her portraits were so lifelike that the figures seemed to breathe, that they were only surprised by the fact that they were silent. He wanted to see somebody who had done nothing like this before, and he got that in Sofonisba. This is her self-portrait, and she shows herself painting, which is a huge change for what women typically do. But the work I want to discuss is the chess piece. So here's the work we're going to discuss in depth, the chess game. In this work, first thing I want to draw your attention to is Lucia. She's the 3rd born of the Anguissola children, and she is manipulating the figures on the chessboard. Across from her, being her rival, is Minerva, the 4th born of the children, and she is the other end of the chess game players. Looking at them and kind of laughing is their youngest sister, Europa, and in the background, you're going to see another lady, Bianca. She's their lady's maid. Some things I want to draw your attention to. Check out their clothes. So if you look in detail, so that is a rich red brocade fabric. The blue on top of it is heavily embroidered. The black of Minerva's clothes has gold embroidery, and it's meant to look like real gold threads. There's elaborate lace at all of the girls' throats. They're wearing jewels. They have lace at their cuffs. Their sleeves are very rich. Their skirts are huge. There's a lot of fabric. This shows how wealthy this family is. This is luxury in process. The chessboard has inlaid ivory on it. The rug covering it is of Turkish design. The background being in a garden, these are all things you wouldn't anticipate just hanging out with your family playing a board game, right? But the faces also show laughter. They show this engagement between the two of them, between them as a family. It's looking at the kind of competitiveness that happens within families in this board game spirit way. But I also want to mention the fact that it's chess. So chess is an intellectual game. So you have women not just sitting and lolling around in fancy clothes, eating food, or just hanging out gossiping. They're involved in intellectual pursuits. This is even more highlighted with Bianca, the lady's maid in the far corner. So she's wearing incredibly simple clothing. Her age is showing in her face, and she's looking on, but you can see she has kind of a puzzled expression. So she doesn't understand the entirety of the game, but these younger women do and are showcasing their intelligence. This is a really different look at young women interacting with the world during the Renaissance. And this is what Sofonisba brings in her art. She makes these figures come alive, and she emphasizes things that are perhaps not as oftenly seen in other artists' work. So what I love about studying these artists is you really get a chance to see work outside of those who are perhaps the norms. Remember those big 3 names that we talked about, and that 4th you can email me. It's this idea that there are so many artists working in any period who show really amazing parts of a period and genre to give you a sense of real full-roundedness and what those actual humans were doing. Whether it's looking to your wife as your muse, stamping out evil, or you're looking at your sisters in your family and playing games, and how do you represent that? So I hope you've learned a little bit more about these artists. You had 2 opportunities for extra credit in this, and I'll speak to you soon.